Hello, Year 8. It's Mr. Johnson here. Hope you're well. Just starting our new topic on borders, which will take us to the end of the term. We've moved on from urban challenges. There are some similarities in terms of how you'll describe effects. There's some positive and negative effects, but we'll certainly link to some of those negative challenges that you looked at in the last few weeks. If we just share what you're doing today. So let's go to here. So the title, what borders do I know about? And firstly, before you pause it, I just want you to think of what a border is and then put a definition in your own words. So feel free to pause now and carry on with the first activity. Okay. Also, you'll see the extension about how borders can be grouped, and we'll look at putting them into categories today so that you're in a good position to, I'll be honest, look at more interesting things where you look at specific borders in the subsequent lessons. So, like we said, we're looking at different borders around the world. We're not, if you have an atlas, great. If not, Google on computer or on phone, Google Maps would be absolutely fine. We're not going to spend much time, obviously, on Atlas work, any time on Atlas work, but we are going to discuss borders, get a definition down, complete an odd one out activity, which will be on a separate Word document that's sent, and look at some migration keywords as well. Basically, today is looking at the key terminology so that in the future lessons, when we're discussing with those words, you understand what we're talking about. So a border, a line separating two places. They can be large, medium or small, natural or man-made. Try and think about what sort of natural borders would be, and what we often think of them man-made. They're easy, but think about what natural borders there might be around the world. So just pause and just write down that definition and try and offer an example. Okay. What I'd like you to do after that, underneath, is make a mind map. Half a page is plenty. And with this title, what borders do I know about? And try and put as many down as possible. I'll start you off on one that we are going to be looking at soon, which is the USA to Mexico border. And try and think about any other borders. Maybe it's the border between East Sussex and West Sussex, for instance. Try and put as many down as you can. Feel free to pause right now. Okay, after that, I would like you to work on the odd one out sheet. So you should have a Word document that's sent with this video, which has an odd one out sheet. And there you'll see a series of statements. If I just go out of this and go to, it should look a bit like this. Well, exactly like this. And it has the activity description on the top. I'll just read this out for you. Below you have some examples of borders. Look at the photos and read the captions and decide which one the odd one out is. In your book, write down the answer with an explanation of why you have picked it. Try and think about this. If you've got anyone else in the household, ask them as well. And you've got some examples of lots of different borders here. Starting with South Korea, North and South Korea, popular one, 1989, we got knocked down the Berlin Wall. Great Wall of China, popular Mexican-USA border, that's often in the news. You've got Himalaya Mountains, so not necessarily a wall, the River Thames. So start to think about these groups. So think about from A, B, and C, which one could be the odd one out? Number 2, A, B, and C, which one could be the odd one out? 3, and then 4. Have a go at that, and most importantly, try and back up your ideas and say, why did you pick a certain one as being the odd one out? For example, the first one, it could be the Berlin Wall separated East and West Berlin until it was knocked down. If we go on to this, think about why that might be the odd one out. Try and have a think of why that might be picked and justify why. For me, I'd say this one just because it's in the United Kingdom. So that could be an example. Okay. So really have a go at that odd one out activity and try and back up your ideas why a certain one is the odd one out. Try and again put the borders into groups: natural, man-made, modern, for instance, and man-made historical. Try and put them into groups so you really understand these different borders. Okay. While there's another video I want to show you about why to do with borders as well. It's on, if you go to Wonder Why is a content provider, and it talks about the most complex international borders in the world. So obviously I'm not going to play this here because the sound won't work, but you've got the link there, so feel free to use that and just watch it, and that just might give you a bit more additional background research for when you do your future work on borders. I don't know whether I mentioned borders enough today. Right. Lastly, again, this today is about doing that odd one out activity, getting your definition of border down, and then breaking down some keywords to do with migration. So you've got these, and these are the main 7 terms to focus on. So with this video, I just wanted to talk through some of these. Now, before I start, I would like you to think of, do you know the definitions, or do you have an idea about some of these already? So just pause it and have a think about whether you heard some of these terms or you have a good idea about some. You should know a few of them. Just pause it now. Okay, I'll just run through the differences between some of them, and honestly some governments as well confuse these terms, and some people in very, very good jobs get these confused as well. So firstly, migration is the movement of people. So the key bit here is the movement of people from, you could say, from the origin, from the place, from origin to a destination. So from one place to where they want to go, which is the destination. You'll hear maybe more about that when we talk about push and pull factors in a couple of weeks' time. A migrant, I'm doing some of this work for you, I am mindful of that. A migrant is the person that's moving, so the person who is moving. Now, there is a difference between a migrant and a refugee. The big thing here is choice. Have a think about what I mean by that. Why is a migrant different to a refugee? And it's got something to do with choice. Just pause it and have a think of why they could be quite different. Okay, so with a refugee, migrant could be, for instance, a footballer is going from, let's say, France to England. They have a choice to move, whereas a refugee might be leaving somewhere due to war and be looking to move to a safer country. And immigrants, I like to think immigrants, or immigration, emigrations, the process is to do with those people. Immigrant, if you think of E, stands for exit, so it's when people are leaving a country, so someone who is exiting. I can spell. And really think about E for exit, E for immigrants. Someone who is going into a country. Often people are getting very, very confused, and as soon as they hear the word immigrants, they're thinking illegal immigrant. That is not the case. There is a tiny, tiny, tiny proportion of immigrants that do enter the country illegally. Lots of people in places of work, people that live in the UK, many are immigrants. Not many at all are illegal immigrants. Unfortunately, we do hear quite a lot about illegal immigrants, and some people get them confused. So it will be very silly for me just to copy and paste this to here, but if I add in, that will work very nicely. A refugee and asylum seeker, both migrants, both migrants will be escaping some terrible conditions in their country, be it war, be it persecution. However, there's a slight difference where, as a refugee, the migrant has applied and for status as a refugee, whereas asylum seeker, they're looking into that process. So a refugee is almost, you could look at it as like an official asylum seeker. So a migrant who is seeking refuge, a synonym for refuge could be safety. From a, you could say a poor environment, you could say from a dangerous country, perhaps, be it from war or so on. They have refugee status that is recognised by the UN, the 1951 agreement. Trying to sort my spelling out. That is recognised by the United Nations. Let's sort this spelling out. I think it's just with the American spelling on there. Asylum seeker, a migrant who is seeking refuge / safety from a dangerous country. They haven't yet received. Let's minimize this a little bit. Okay, so they haven't yet received official confirmation that they're not recognised yet as a refugee. What I'd like you to do, the last activity before I talk about other research and any other bits you can do before next week, the last activity after the borders definition, after the odd one out, and you've written down some of the key words, instead of just copying all of this, which would be incredibly boring, I would like, if I just embolden this, I would like 2 paragraphs about migration using all of the terms above. I will start one off for you if you're not too sure. So, sorry, that's not much help, but I've started this off. You can talk about, you might even think about your family, a friend that could be a migrant, or you've heard about migration in the news. So try and be quite creative about it and think about, is there anything that's personal to you to do with migration? That will make the information stick a lot more. So just to recap, if we go back to the learning objectives, for today, we want a definition of border. We want the odd one out activity done with that justification that we mentioned before. We'd like the keywords to be included in 2 paragraphs that are just down here. Finally, next week we'll be looking at natural borders and looking in detail about one specific border, which is natural with the sea. To help you on that, there's further research which has been on the TV recently, is Mediterranean. So it's a big expanse of sea. There are lots of borders, and last night they spoke about Turkey, about Istanbul, and the border between 2 continents, Europe and Asia. So that is a really good show to have a look at on iPlayer. So that might help you for next week, or even if you wanted to look at it in another time, it'll just give you a bit more of an extra case study that you could use. And lastly, before we just show you the information about anyone to contact in the geography department, just think about what problems you might think some borders may cause. So just have a think about that. And finally, if you need to speak to anyone at all and share any work, please contact the members of staff there. And lastly, from me, just really hope you stay safe, and see you next week. Thank you. Bye.